Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Autonomous Vehicles Competitive Landscape discussion. This is mostly a VC panel, really set up around the idea of finding and the big opportunities in the landscape. And hopefully this will give you a good perspective from a bunch of investors about where we see exciting opportunities around autonomous vehicles and maybe more broadly connected transportation. So my name is Ajay. I am a founding partner at Happiness Ventures, and we are a new venture fund. We have $480 million in our fund group to deploy, and we're looking for awesome, hot startups and really brilliant entrepreneurs with great IP to invest in across a wide variety of categories, including the space we're about to talk about. With that said, I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists and have them share a little bit about their funds and their backgrounds.
Thanks. Jim Scheinman, founder of Maven Ventures. We're a seed investment firm. We're investing out of Fund 2. We look for game-changing market opportunities, and we're usually a little bit early than most other folks. In particular, what's relevant here is that we invested in a company called Cruise in the seed round back in 2013, and we started looking at autonomous vehicle technology a year before that. We are also, and obviously Cruise was a big exit to GM last year. We are also a seed investor in a company called Embark, which is self-driving truck technology company. Marble, which is last mile delivery vehicle technology. And our latest one in this space is a seed investment. We haven't announced yet, but they will be one of the, I think, big hits out of Y Combinator, and you'll be reading about that soon.
Hi there, I'm Mark Platshon. I think a lot of people know me as the guy that set up BMW's iVentures for the last 5 years. Now I've started Icebreaker Ventures as a multi-corporate fund that's really focused on the whole, what we call ACEs, autonomous, connected, electric, and shared mobility. We're just making our first investments now.
And my name is Quinn Garcia. I'm one of the managing directors of a VC firm called Autotech Ventures based in Palo Alto that invests exclusively in ground transportation related startups. So think about the way, things with tires and the way that you buy those vehicles, sell those vehicles, ride them, drive them, share them, park them, repair them. So think about all the manufacturing ecosystem around ground transportation vehicles, but also all the services, transportation services. And we're investors in Lyft, the rideshare company. We're investors in a startup called Outdoorsy, which is essentially Airbnb for motorhomes and recreational vehicles. We invested in Realign, which is a long-haul trucking enterprise software company. We invested in Volta Industries, which is an electric vehicle recharging network that is funded by advertising, so free of charge EV charging that's funded by ads. And we're invested into an autonomous vehicle perception startup called DeepScale, which is basically a startup that uses neural networks to gather sensor readings to allow vehicles to better perceive their environment.
Great, thanks Quinn, Mark, and Jim. You have some expert VCs here today, so when we open it up for audience Q&A, please come prepared with some great questions. To start things off, let's, for a minute or two, discuss the potential benefits of the autonomous connected car on productivity, society, community, lifestyle. I'd love to hear from the panelists. Mark, why don't you kick things off with your point of view and take on how autonomous vehicles and connected cars really are going to shape society going forward?
Well, I think, as we talk about autonomous cars or ACEs, the first thing you gotta realize is we're doing this in order to save lives. We kill 40,000 people a year in the United States. We kill an equal number of people with guns and cars in the United States. The car problem's easier to solve. Sad to say. I think we have to start from the standpoint of saving lives. A human driver kills one person per roughly 100 or 120 million miles. So we're pretty good, but we're actually terrible. So the standards for these autonomous systems, if they're an order of magnitude better, it means you got to go 1 billion miles to prove you're better. And then you got to do that over and over again. So it's a pretty interesting technical challenge, but that's where we're headed. And I think that, you add that to the kinds of productivity changes, throughput changes, it changes everything about urban living.
Jim?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'd say that, 1 million lives a year around the world are, taken because of human error in these dangerous vehicles. When I start thinking about self-driving cars, and you really think about it, it's probably the most transformative technology that we're going to live through in our lifetime, maybe second to the internet or up there with the internet. It changes everything. In a world where there's fully autonomous level 4, level 5 cars, maybe they're all ride-sharing, it changes our lives like nothing has ever done since the internet. And good on you for being here and learning about this. If you're involved in this space, for the next 5 to 10 or 20 years, this is going to be where we're going to see incredible, transformative companies coming. I'd say in addition to saving lives, what I get really excited about is, at scale, every car could be an electric vehicle. We don't have to worry about it. And the world that I see is we don't actually own a car, so everything's a lot more affordable. We pay a service fee, we push a button, this vehicle shows up for us, it's electric, we're not contributing to pollution anymore, like it could save our climate. One of the earlier panels talked about how about 15 to 20% of our population can't actually drive today. And as we have an aging population, it's becoming dangerous for people in their 80s, 90s, and 100s driving. All those issues go away. And then think about your life going to and from work if you have a commute. If you're one of those unlucky folks who have, 40 minutes or an hour and a half commute each way, it becomes a delightful experience. You can actually get some sleep or get your work done, maybe do a Zoom video call on the way to work, or catch up on your Netflix shows. When you start thinking about how this is going to change our lives, I think you get that understanding of where this is going and why we're so excited about it. Quinn,
anything to add to?
I think Mark and Jim shared my views more eloquently than I could. I would just add that there's a lot of hype right now around autonomous vehicles, and I think that hype is necessary. So I view hype as kind of an equation where the numerator is the amount of buzz around a technology, and the denominator is the amount of benefit to society related to a certain technology. And as of right now, there's very little benefit to society that's being enabled by autonomous vehicles. However, in the future, that denominator is going to get enormous. But the numerator right now is what's driving all of us to invest into this space, and all of the people in this room to think about this and think about all these problems and address these problems slowly but surely to create that larger denominator.
Absolutely. I think the numerator is truly inspiring and creating a lot of imaginative startups and ideas that hopefully will change the world. I think what's interesting about the potential for the technology is it's also fraught with tons of immediately solvable and addressable challenges, but also some really complicated ones that I think have to be thought through. So I'm going to ask, take a little bit of a left turn and ask a challenging question to the panel. We talked about saving lives. We talked about how the technology is going to be transformative. We talked about 1 billion miles, as a potential benchmark or standard for, how many miles you drive before your autonomous car kills someone. So, to put it bluntly, so how do we reconcile kind of that new world order? Who's paying for that liability? Who bears the burden of risk? Is it the passengers? Is it the manufacturer of the car, of the LiDAR, of the AI that drives the car? What are your thoughts on kind of how the actual industry gets shaken up based on a lot of these unanswered questions right now?
I think Volvo kind of stepped up a couple of months ago,
right,
and just said to everybody, we, the OEM, are going to be responsible for our autonomous cars, period. stop debating this, move on. So I don't know that everybody has signed up to say, yeah, I'm going to do the same. But I think actually the insurance companies understand this is going to become a product liability business, not a car driver insurance business. And the risks, I guess another sort of crass way of looking at it is the cost of a human life has been well established in the courts. And whether it's killed by an autonomous car or a regular car or a sports car, it's still kind of, there's a boundary and that's been accepted. It kind of works. So I think personally, I think we're gonna make this transition more seamlessly and with less disruption than a lot of people think. The insurance companies are already dealing with it. The OEMs are already dealing with it. Everybody downstream of them will have some liability, but I don't think it's going to be that big a problem.
So there have been some recent studies that have, talked about society's readiness to adopt a self-driving car, especially a level 5 self-driving car that's fully autonomous. And those studies have been overwhelmingly negative, right? Where the readiness of the general populace outside of the Silicon Valley has been relatively low. We're talking in the teens or mid-20s in terms of kind of readiness to accept autonomous vehicles on the road, or to actually be a passenger in one of those vehicles. Jim, what are your thoughts about that as one of the kind of investing pioneers in the space with Cruise? And give us your perspective on level 5 and level 4 if you can.
It's a good question. It's a real issue. I'll give you a very brief story of how I think differently about this. Sure. I was a fourth employee at the first social network called Friendster. Anyone remember Friendster? But it should have been the Facebook. And for a lot of reasons I wrote a white paper on why not. I know this has nothing to do with autonomous cars, but I could tell you that when we created this thing called social networks and we had people starting putting pictures and information about themselves on this new thing called the internet, all my friends who were in their late 20s, early 30s said, I would never, ever do that. Are you kidding me? Why? How could someone come find me or my kids? And so when we have transformative technologies, sure. It's a mind shift. And the people that, in this survey, and there are other surveys by that have shown other things that are contrary to that data, in that particular survey, it's how you ask the question. If you said to someone, for example, imagine a world where you never have to own a car. You don't have to pay $35,000 to $50,000 or $100,000 again for a car. You don't have to worry about insurance, registrations, license fees. You never have to worry about parking the car wherever you go. You just pay a couple $100 or a couple $1,000s for a service. You push a button, something shows up for you. It's always safe. It gets you where you want to go. You always get there on time. You're never sitting in traffic. You're not polluting the earth. When you start wording in a different way, maybe we can start shifting our mental state to think, that would be a pretty wonderful world. I wonder, maybe I would be willing to take that risk on something new. So, by the way, if any of you have, young drivers in the family, teens or young adults, ask them, because a lot of them are actually not running out to get their license right away. They're happy to take Uber around the world. They see the benefits of this already. So often, it's not our generation that's going to make the shift, but it's maybe the younger generation that's going to push the envelope. But there are some real challenges. We all have cars. What do we do with them? I mean, they're tough questions. I don't necessarily have the right answer, but those are things that we can debate too.
Cool. Quinn.
I would add to that. I'm actually not concerned at all about whether consumers will adopt this technology. When elevators first came out, people were nervous about them, and you had to have operators inside them to give people peace of mind. When BART here in the Bay Area first came along, people didn't want to get into these automated trains, and so they had to have operators in there. And I think the same thing's going to happen with autonomous vehicles. And I also think that consumer sentiment shifts relatively quickly. And what's the likelihood that it shifts in favor? And I've actually seen studies today that show that there's a pretty positive reception to autonomous vehicles today. But even if there weren't, in the number of years that it's going to take between now and let's call it level 4, level 5, autonomy, I think there's plenty of time for consumer sentiment to shift. And I don't think that there's too many lobbying groups that are against autonomous vehicles. It's pretty clear to almost everybody except for drivers' unions and a few other folks. I mean, maybe we'll need fewer hospital workers because there'll be less people getting collisions, and maybe we'll need fewer police because there'll be less people speeding out there, and maybe there's a few other demographics, but you don't have too many people who can make arguments that this isn't in the benefit of society.
That's great. Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the future of the autonomous vehicle and the connected transportation space. There are a lot of big players that are in this space, from Uber to Apple and Google and others, kind of aiming for a big outcome in this market. There's also, of course, a lot of alternative options or other kind of segments of the transportation market, including solutions that solve the last mile with the rise of e-bikes and e-scooters, particularly in China and in Europe. We're seeing a big adoption of those types of solutions, to hyperloops and boring underground tunnels, and even flying cars like the Kitty Hawk and the Lilium vertical takeoff car plane. So what are your thoughts on kind of where the big bets and the big opportunities are? What are the moonshots that you want to invest in, and are there spaces yet to be explored? Are there pitches you're still waiting to hear?
Sure, why not lead off?
Go for it, Mark.
You named a number of the moonshot ones, the far out ones, and those are fun to listen to the pitch. I don't know if they're fun to invest in. We'll see. Right now, I'm very intrigued with sort of the richness of this space. As you said, there's a few of the big guys, the Uber and Lyfts, that are off to the races and doing very well. I think we're still very much at the infancy of what that's going to look like. Every car company, every OEM, every tier one, many other kind of subscription business providers are starting to think about, what do I want to be in the next generation? Do I want to make a $40,000 car and sell it and make a $2,000 or $4,000 profit? Or do I want to make a $40,000 car and put it into mobility service and have it generate a couple $100,000 of revenue over the next few years? So I think what we're seeing is a lot of companies want to be in the mobility service business. They want to out Uber or out Lyft. They want to figure out what this looks like. And yet if they want to start that themselves, they got to sit down, put together a team, write 3 years of software, and figure out how to then launch their first car. So there's a number of companies and services now that can sort of be the picks and shovels, the Salesforce.com of mobility, to say, okay, I can launch you a white label mobility service, whether it's to deliver people or goods or kids or seniors or whatever it is. I can run that. I have an AI backbone. I've got controls. I got communications. I got security. I can do that. And those are interesting. Sort of the picks and shovels businesses, I think, are pretty interesting.
Great. Quinn, do you want to add your thoughts about kind of the opportunity landscape as you see it?
I'm probably the guy who's going to miss out on a lot of the moonshots. I'm a bit more of a realist as compared to some other VCs out there. I think these guys are investing in things that are pragmatic and can be commercialized in the near term. But I'm probably going to feel some FOMO for missing out on certain deals that are these mega moonshots, because I want to see things that can be commercialized in the lifetime. And I have to think in 10-year increments as a venture capitalist. I also, I actually just got back from India, and I imagine a lot of people here have linkage to India. And if you think about autonomous vehicles being, we're all up here talking about how autonomous vehicles are going to change our society so dramatically, and what's the time frame for that? And it's, some people say it's 3 years, some people say it's 15, but India already has, in my opinion, the world's leading vehicle-to-vehicle communication network, and it's called the Horn. Right? And New York City is probably second best behind India. But in light of that, I believe that India is going to be one of the last places that adopts autonomous vehicles. Not because there's a great tech industry there and there's a lot of brilliant people there, but the road infrastructure and the culture and kind of the driving behavior over there makes it very difficult to deploy what we call ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance System. So. While that part of the world I think really needs it, because in my 2 weeks there I managed to get in 2 car accidents and almost killed someone on a bike. I wasn't driving, but I was being driven by someone else. So it's a pretty dangerous road environment, but it's going to take a very long time. And so I guess that's just kind of a emphasis that I'm a realist as well, and so I'll probably miss out on certain moonshots related to autonomous vehicles in India.
So I think I look at it a little bit differently. I try to envision where the world is going, and then I can make better, more informed investment decisions. So, and I don't know if I'm right. I mean, I think you can make an argument of how autonomy is going to play out. I'll start with Elon. If any of you haven't seen this yet, you should see Elon Musk's TED Talk. I go to TED. I saw it live. It was amazing. And, he was asked, okay, how long is this going to be? He said, by the end of this year, we're going to have a fully autonomous level 4, level 5, which means you don't really need a person driving it, going from, a Tesla going from Los Angeles to New York. It's mapped out. It's on its own. There'll be a person in there because you have to legally today, but it wouldn't need a person. And then he said, and by the end of next year, that vehicle, we could tell it in the middle of the trip, go to Florida, and it would change its direction. I thought I was aggressive, so that was a lot more aggressive than I was thinking, and I think that's great. I love, having a visionary leading that push. I bet you that half his engineers were like shocked when they heard that. Really, what are we gonna do? But you need that to get us there faster. His vision is that you're gonna own a car still, but you're gonna be able to put it on a platform, and you can let other people use it. I mean, think about today. We have our vehicles sitting for 90% of the time doing nothing. It's a waste, right? So that's interesting. I mean, in a world where you still own a car and it's autonomous and you get to, other people can rent it out, if that's the way it's going to go, there's interesting opportunities to invest in that space. If we go the next step, which is actually like an airplane, most of us will never own an airplane, So maybe 1 or 5% of the population will own a self-driving vehicle because you want it, you don't want anyone to touch it, you want it to be there whenever you want. You don't care if it's really, really expensive and it sits in your garage all the time. But let's just say maybe no one ever really owns a car again. If that's the world, then there's different potential investment opportunities. And in any of those scenarios, though, what I get really excited about, because it's going to be massive opportunity for me we're also a very active consumer software investor. I think of that new vehicle as this new device, right? It's the new platform. I mean, it's why companies like Apple and Google have been so excited about getting involved in it, because we're going to be trapped in these vehicles, whatever they are. They're not going to be a car could be for a long time during the day. And there'll be really interesting consumer applications that we can build for that, whether it's entertainment or work-related. And I think there are going to be massive opportunities for us to invest in that space, not in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, but in the next 2 to 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely. I think that really kind of sets a great stage for what a investment landscape and opportunity set looks like when you start thinking about the connected vehicle being this living room on wheels, or this family room on wheels. And a gap that I'm seeing in the market right now is just a lack of really innovative startups kind of trying to reinvent that space. And you have a lot of ADAS and infotainment kind of stack companies playing, but they seem to be taking kind of the more tired old approach. What are your thoughts on kind of the family room on wheels, and what kinds of opportunities do you guys want to see there, and how do you get those opportunities into the automotive space because of the product life cycle challenge of how do you even get that into a Ford car? How long is that going to take? Maybe Mark, you can take that one.
Well, I think it's I don't know how they're really thinking about it, but if I was at Amazon, I wouldn't call it a car anymore. It's a media consumption machine, and
Media consumption chamber.
and as well, the ultimate driving machine is BMW. The media consumption machine is I mean, Amazon. If the cost of mobility goes from $1 a mile to 20 or 25 cents a mile, and if you're consuming their media, they can just about give you the car as long as you're doing some kind of productivity or infotainment or entertainment task with using their media. Maybe there's Netflix cars. Maybe there's, I don't know. If mobility's that cheap, why do you have to call a car to go? Why doesn't the store or the mall that wants you to come provide the car? So I think we can turn a lot of business models upside down when mobility is cheap or delivery is almost free.
That's great. Maybe your ad media fueled charging network, right, Quinn, could expand, into that space.
Yeah.
That's great. So what are your thoughts on, maybe we can kind of get more real for the entrepreneurs in the audience before we turn it over to Q&A. What are the best ways to for a startup out there that's thinking about tackling some segment of the space? Let's avoid the moonshots for a moment, but kind of focus on the more practical stuff. What are the best ways for them to get engaged with the automotive players and the OEMs and the distributors, the dealer networks? How do they actually get into the ecosystem? Because it's complex, there are many endpoints, and it's not really easy to navigate.
So I think that supplying into an automaker is really painful for startup companies. So it takes a very long time to become a supplier of a component or embedded software that goes into a vehicle, and it's very expensive. And there's a lot of qualification steps that are along the way. And I'm invested into a company, and I'm on the board of another company that does exactly that. So I'm not opposed to it, but I recognize that there's challenges there. And there's probably more capital intensity there. I would say the majority of the startups that we look at are actually decoupled from an automaker's supply chain, meaning they don't actually sell into an automaker. So if you look at the auto manufacturing business is the one that gets all the media airplay out there today. Everyone's talking about Apple making cars and GM being disrupted and the like. But if you look at the service sector around transportation, meaning how do you actually buy these things, dealerships? How do you insure them? I think Mark mentioned earlier some of the insurance implications. How do you finance them? How do you repair them? Logistics. If you look at all these services, they're 10 times, they're an order of magnitude larger than the vehicle manufacturing sector. And it happens that the majority of the most successful startups in the transportation domain are in those services businesses as opposed to selling into an automaker. So Mobileye is an example of a startup that was selling into an automaker. And you can argue that Cruise could have been a standalone company, and Jim knows better than I do, could have been a standalone company, or it could actually be a supplier into an automaker. But if you look at Waze and Lyft and Uber and Fleetmatics and Telogis and the majority of the most successful startups in this space, they're actually not selling into the automotive value chain, in part because it historically was really painful to do. The automakers are making it a little bit easier to do nowadays, and they're becoming more collaborative with startups, but it's still more challenging than kind of doing an end around.
I'd say if you wanna be in this space now, it's matured a little bit. I think an idea and a PowerPoint or a little code isn't going to do it. The investors want to see, as you're seeing here in the previous session, they want to see that your platform can drive a car, your platform can navigate at night, your platform can can do what it's doing. Cruise got their deal done because they could drive the GM execs around in the city, and they thought Super Cruise was dead on arrival. You know, Cadillac was going to be embarrassed, so they had to do something. So you know, we're seeing a real need for companies to go ahead and take their vision system and make it do a map and drive a car.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I would say, you know, we look for companies that can control their own destiny. And not that you can't work with the large OEMs and the tier one suppliers, but I mean, the challenge is not only traditionally challenged businesses, but you know, there's a lot of disruption going on, so you're working with very nervous companies. They understand that potentially they may not be around in the next 5 to 10 years unless they innovate. And you have that classic innovator's dilemma. So they're not sure if they should work with you, or you're going to put them out of business, or should they buy you, or how that works. So it becomes really, really complicated. Cruise was definitely, we were on a path to be a standalone business. I mean, that's the only reason why the company was acquired. We were able to say credibly that, no, we don't really want to get acquired right now. We're going to continue along. And I think you need to have that, at least from our perspective and the kind of deals we're looking at. But if you're also thinking about what the world's going to look like and building some kind of consumer experience in these vehicles, we're happy to start taking a look at those kinds of deals too.
Cool. Well, I think you heard it very clearly here. Control your own destiny, and don't rely on the success with developing relationships with the automotive kind of supply chain. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. So are there any questions from the audience?
We have just time for one.
One. I was trying to sneak the extra question in for you guys. But I'm sure the panelists will be happy to answer any questions afterwards as well.
I've got a Tesla question, and basically it's, will the rest of the industry survive Tesla? And I'd say, like with the mobile phone industry, nobody really survived Apple. Like, you know, new things came and Android came and everything, but it just kind of wiped the slate clean. And if you listen to the earnings call after TED, Elon's like, well, the factories are robots interacting, and it's more complex than the car, and I don't know what I'd do if I was anybody else. So is that just like boasting, or is there something really that is going to change the field on the whole OEM space?
I think, you know, there's a lot of truth in that. You know, the slate tends to get wiped clean every so often. And so, you know, is Tesla going to change and redefine the industry? Absolutely, it's already happening. And I think the traditional manufacturers are having to figure out how they respond to that change. Mark, I think, made some great points about that earlier. When you think about kind of all of these industries, you know, you can start asking the question, well, is Tesla going to get, you know, also wiped clean from the slate with Lilium and Kitty Hawk and, you know, the rest of the self-flying autonomous drones that are going to transport people around. You know, drop your kids off at school via drone. Yeah, you know, I mean, it's entirely possible that that could happen.
I liked Elon's answer to the flying drones. He said, you know, I don't know, imagine a world where these things are flying around and a hubcap falls off and you get decapitated. That's a little problem. You know, I think the truth is, like, the flying cars is really cool to dream about. And there's something there. To me, that's really far out for that to be affordable and possible for everybody. But self-driving, autonomous Level 5 vehicles is not that far out. I mean, the truth is, it's here. You go to Arizona, look at San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Singapore. I mean, soon in our lifetime, like very soon, in the next year or two, I think a brave city in America is going to stand up and say, you want to come to New Orleans, you want to come to Detroit, it's self-driving cars only. And guess what? It'll become one of the most popular tourist destinations in America. And all the other cities are going to look around and say, what are they doing over there? And it's just going to start happening, right? That can happen today.
Yeah.
I think your point about Tesla is an interesting one. They've already had a huge impact on the auto industry. Maybe there's 4 things where Tesla's literally years ahead, and it's going to be, and so everybody's trying to react to that, whether it's over-the-air updates, which nobody else can really do, and is totally necessary to get to the next generation of mobility. The direct retail model is highly disruptive and I think poorly understood. There's still private equity firms buying up dealers, not realizing that the dealer game is over. The having your own control of batteries and gigafactories is strategically huge, and if they can get the cost of cells down to $50 a kilowatt hour, which is sort of where they and others are headed, electric transportation just wins and it's game over. So, we've got a bunch of these kind of changes that really transform the industry, and Tesla's at the core of all of them.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out for the panel. Appreciate your time and your participation. And feel free to come chat with the panelists afterwards. Thank you.